Hearing from the Sacramento County DA, Anne Marie Schubert. She joins us live right now on the phone. Another tragedy in our community, but this one obviously on a bigger scale. Anne Marie Schubert, thank you for joining us. And what are your thoughts right now after hearing that more senseless violence happened and broke out in our community?
Important thing right now is just, as these families wake up that lost their loved ones, that knowing and understanding that their lives will never be the same. I mean, I've been in this business a long time, and when you sit with people that have lost their family members to violent crime, the sunlight never looks the same for them. And so we've always got to put them first. And I just think that there's been an extraordinary response by law enforcement. I mean, there's obviously a lot of videos out there on the internet of what's transpiring, but it just my heart aches families in our community. And as your district attorney, just know that we're working with law enforcement, and if and when an arrest is made, we're going to make sure that we hold those individuals fully accountable for these horrific crimes.
District Attorney Schubert, we've been hearing from a number of city leaders as well and law enforcement leaders in the community talking about the rise in violence that we have seen over the course of the pandemic, maybe even before that. What are your thoughts on, I mean, this is obviously just nobody expected, this is mind-boggling, but what are your thoughts about the increase in gun violence just in general in Sacramento and the surrounding areas?
Well, the increase in violence is across the state and across this country. That we cannot deny that. And since really for the last few years, we've seen an extraordinary number of illegal guns. I mean, I've been talking about it for probably over a year, that we have so many illegal guns on the streets of our community that we have to be bolder and stronger and more aggressive in how we deal with them. And that's, setting aside this tragedy, we have to acknowledge that we have to take illegal guns off the streets and hold those people accountable that are perpetuating crimes with guns.
What is your message to the people who go out there and commit these crimes? Obviously, they've just ruined their own life. If they are caught, they're going to spend the rest of their life in prison.
Well, as a prosecutor and somebody that has been both in the courtroom and the community, we have to hold people fully accountable. Sadly, we've had a lot of things happen in the last 2 years. We've got a tsunami of things. We've got a number of different policies and things like that that are impacting prosecutors' tools of holding people fully accountable. So, that's what we need to be doing. Nobody wants illegal guns on the streets. Nobody wants somebody to use a gun when they shouldn't have a gun in the first place. So when somebody does commit a crime with a weapon, and they're a felon or they're a prohibited person, we have to be willing to go after them as aggressively as we can and make sure that they're fully accountable for the crimes that they commit.
And when it comes to illegal guns, we were hearing a lot about these things called ghost guns. Is that becoming a bigger problem too?
Oh, absolutely. Ghost guns have been a state and across this country, and we're seeing a proliferation of that. And that's where we have to just constantly be vigilant in investigating those crimes, prosecuting those crimes, objecting to or advocating against the early release of people that are committing those types of guns, not letting those types of individuals out on zero bail. I mean, there's a number of different things, but yeah, ghost guns is a problem. And that's, it's the fact that we can't trace them. And so, obviously criminals want to get their hands on those types of guns because that leads to lesser likelihood they're going to be caught. And so, we need to have the tools, and we need to be vigilant in our investigations and our prosecutions, and working with law enforcement as we are every day, SACPD, our sheriff, all of our local agencies, to make sure we do everything we can to prevent them from getting in the hands of criminals, but when they do get in their hands, that we hold them fully accountable.
You mentioned tools. Can you be specific? What do you need? What does the DA's office need in the form of tools to do what they do to keep criminals from committing acts of violence like this?
Well, it's a combination of good public, sadly what we've seen over the last several years is weakening of accountability. So, we don't even call a felon in possession of a firearm a violent crime. So we see an extraordinary number of them getting out after serving a fraction of their sentence because of some of the laws we have. We need resources for law enforcement. We want to make sure that we take the guns. You have enough officers on the streets to aggressively investigate those types of individuals that shouldn't have them in the first place. similar to the person that sadly committed the horrific crimes against his children, shouldn't have had a weapon. But there's got to be sufficient resources so that we can, law enforcement has the ability not just to react to crime, to proactively go out there and do investigative types of work so we can take the guns out of those people's hands. But then the other part about it is, we can't consistently weaken responsibility when we actually catch somebody that shouldn't have it. And whether it's weakening it through laws, weakening it through early releases from prison, whatever it is. But as I've said many times, there's a tsunami of various things that have come together. And now, we see this kind of chaos across our state, across our country. And we have to be willing to hold people accountable for committing crimes like this.
And Ann, tell me about how someone can be a good witness. There was a lot of people out there. A lot of people took video. Likely this person, since it happened in the spur of the moment is what it seems, their face wasn't covered. How can somebody out there in the community who was there help law enforcement to track the individual or individuals responsible?
Well, obviously it's an act, so I can't reveal anything about the investigation. But what I can say is SAC PD has been very transparent about their asking of the public for help. I believe they have an evidence portal that you can actually help upload videos. The reality is that many times in our world, we need citizens. We need good citizens to step up and tell us what they saw, what they heard, anything like that. Because at the end of the day, it takes a community oftentimes to help us solve crime, and that's the part about being a good citizen. We've sadly got 6 people that have died, that families are forever changed. We have many, many people that have been shot, and so we need the public assistance, as the chief of police has said. Anything that people can share, please do so.
Sacramento County District Attorney Anne Marie Schubert speaking about this terrible mass shooting in downtown Sacramento. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule today and to give us that interview. We really appreciate it. Thank you.